Welcome back to the economic and environmental cost of Bitcoin. I'm Hass and you're watching part 8 of our 10-part series. Today, we will finally take you through our model to calculate the cost of Bitcoin. You don't have to have watched the entire series before you watch this episode, but parts 6 and 7 are prerequisite watching if you're going to understand what's going on in this episode. So for those yet to watch episodes 6 and 7, I'll see you back here in a little bit when you've finished watching, and for everyone else who's fully caught up, let's get stuck right in. Also, before we start, we have now had an additional difficulty cycle since my report just over a fortnight ago, as well as new ASIC tech hitting the market and a decent amount of network growth. I'll be using the new hash rate, best dollar per gigahash figures, and best watt per gigahash figures. All other assumptions remain fixed. When comparing the Antminer S9J to other ASICs, it is still ahead in terms of dollars per gigahash, which is the dominant factor making up cost to mine. In just a matter of weeks, average dollar per gigahash has plummeted to 3.1 cents, or a 10% drop in a fortnight. Definitely not a Bitmain shill, and frankly, I think they will lose their place at the top soon enough due to the various issues surrounding them, and particularly the ones that have popped up in just the last fortnight alone. But they're the cheapest, so the market will gravitate towards them. The following tables will show the outputs from the economic model, which is based on the assumptions set out in part 6 and 7 of the series. Orange cells are variables and inputs, whereas grey cells are calculation cells. So let's get right into CapEx. First, we'll revisit part 6 of this series on hash rate evolution and economic drivers and talk about market composition. There, we assume that retail miners make up 65% of the market, with the remaining 35% being made up by chip fabricators. The chip fabricators also get an upfront discount on the hardware they mine. That is, a discounted dollar per gigahash rate. The benchmark piece of hardware used for this study, the Bitmain Antminer, provides a market average price of 3.1 cents per gigahash and 0.095 watts per gigahash. The network has been rationalized into S9J equivalents for easier visualization as hash rate numbers are so large. Number of equivalents is found by dividing the network hash rate by the hash power provided by one Antminer S9J. See part 6 of this series for the full details. Using data on period length, hash rate growth, coins earned, and average price per gigahash, we can calculate the CapEx to be the product of the forecasted difficulty increase in gigahashes multiplied by the market average price per gigahash. This gives us a period CapEx of over 103 million per difficulty period. Dividing this by the 25,850 coins mined and earned in a difficulty period, and this gives you a CapEx of about $4,000 per coin. Once again, see episode 6 of this series for a very detailed breakdown of economic drivers. Having established the market average electricity price of 3.3 cents per kilowatt hour in part 6, and having just determined overall energy use per period, we simply multiply these two numbers together to get a period electricity cost of almost $56 million. Dividing this by the 25,850 coins mined and earned in a difficulty period gives you an OPEX of just almost $21.50 per coin. Adding the CapEx and OPEX figures together results in a total cost of $6,150. This figure can't be taken on face value though, and a sensitivity analysis of our assumptions needs to be better looked at to get a better feel for the range of possible prices. Amazingly enough, price and cost are equal, but trust me though, it's probably a total fluke. That said, we did see the price drop down to my modeled cost quite quickly and sharply in the days after the difficulty change that was used as the baseline for my report. For this sensitivity analysis, it's assumed that all aforementioned assumptions in the model are held constant, with one variable being changed at a time, to see the impact on overall cost. 4 scenarios are demonstrated for each of the 6 variables below, alongside the difference between the modeled cost of $61.50. Here, we see a range in mining costs of between about $5,500 and $6,800. It should be noted that a 50-50 chip fab to retail ratio should be a theoretical maximum, as risk of perception of a 51% attack becomes too high for large miners due to potential catastrophic impact on market price. Here, we see a range in mining costs of between about $6,000 and $6,700. 30% is an unlikely margin for a market so young and starved of competition, whereas 70% is quite ambitious. Here, we see a range in mining costs of between about $5,000 and $6,800. A 1 cent, 2 cent mix should probably be the theoretical minimum price. With cooling being a major factor in electricity costs, the best coolers mine much cheaper than the worst ones. In the best case, this reduces mining costs to around $6,000, and in the worst case, this increases price to about $6,800. As can be expected, as the amount of fees reduce, cost per coin increases, and vice versa. Here, we have a range of between $6,000 and $6,200, so the model isn't too sensitive to changes in fee assumptions. Since CapEx is the main driver of mining cost, and hash rate is the main driver of that, we can see that as the forecast for growth drops, mining cost plummets. The opposite is also true. Considering the very solid history of growth, 5.5% forecasted growth should be a short-term minimum. Over time, the above sensitivities will allow us to make sense of the model's results when compared to actual market price and tweak the model in line with new evidence. The following tables will show the outputs from the economic model, which is based on the assumptions set out in Part 7 of this series. Orange cells are variables and inputs, whereas grey cells are calculation cells. So, let's get into CapEx. Since we've determined the number of S9J equivalents that get put on the network each cycle, as well as the power involved to manufacture hardware, we can easily multiply these together to determine that 19.75 megawatt hour is required to manufacture one S9J every difficult period, or 60 terawatt hours per year, which is more than half of the total energy used by the Bitcoin network. Multiplying this by our emissions factor to get 11.85 ton of carbon dioxide per year to manufacture one S9J every period for a year, or about 36 megatons of carbon dioxide. The other 40-odd% of emissions comes from powering and cooling the network. Knowing the power consumption of manufacturing, we can simply convert this into CO2 emissions by using our emissions factor of 0.6 gigaton per terawatt hour. This results in a total of just under 46 terawatt hour per year. In the global scheme of things, Bitcoin's 110 terawatt hour yearly consumption is just over 1/20% of global consumption, and just over 1/10% of global CO2 emissions. It is unfair to only benchmark Bitcoin's environmental impact by carbon dioxide emissions alone, so we'll assess a few other environmental impacts to compare with the impact of gold mining, namely eutrophication, acidification, ecotoxicity, respiratory inorganics, and carcinogenics and non-carcinogenics. Eutrophication, which is measured in tons of phosphorus equivalents, is the introduction of nutrients into groundwater and other freshwater sources, having a drastic impact on water quality, the local ecology in general, and adverse economic impacts as well. Bitcoin generally has very low externalities as it relies almost strictly on the electrical grid to both mine and produce hardware. Therefore, to determine the eutrophication produced by the energy sources that power Bitcoin, we look at a weighted world average. Global eutrophication stands at about 126.6 million tons per year from a total of 150,000 terawatt hour of global energy produced. Therefore, a terawatt hour produces about 850 tons of phosphorus equivalents. As Bitcoin uses around about 105 terawatt hour per year, 89,250 tons are produced. Acidification is basically an increase in acidity in oceans and other bodies of water and of land and soil. Using a global weighted average of around 4 grams of sulfur dioxide equivalents per kilowatt hour, the Bitcoin network produces 423,000 tons of SO2 equivalents. See the link in the description below for a much deeper look into these figures. Global per capita data is available for all 4 of these metrics. We can multiply this data by total population to get an overall figure. Next, we divide this figure by the terawatts of power generated each year for a per terawatt hour rate, then multiply this by Bitcoin's 110 terawatt hours consumed per year to produce these results. A comparison of these 6 indicators versus that of gold mining and recycling will be discussed next week. Will help put these numbers in perspective for you. In the next episode, we'll be putting gold under the microscope and doing a head-to-head comparison with the Bitcoin network. We look forward to catching you again then. Also, I know that many of you love making spreadsheets and models, but if you can't be bothered replicating my method in your own spreadsheet, you can buy the spreadsheet for about $3.50. The link is in the description below. All money from the spreadsheet sales will be going into a charity endowment, which you'll be able to watch grow via the public address. I use one tip wallet for all of my work, and all money collected from the community via tips will be reinvested back into the community. The endowment will be aimed at scholarships for studies that promote the growth of the Bitcoin community. As always, thanks for watching. Click like and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below. Check out the links in the description for more info and references, and catch us on Twitter, Medium, and LinkedIn for more. Until next time.